This slideshow is about early modern, aka Renaissance, professional English theater. The 16th century saw the rise of professional playwrights in England. Among the one of the early famous playwrights was Christopher Marlowe. He was one of what were referred to as the university wits, that is, part of a group of playwrights who came out of prominent English universities. Marlowe was second only to Shakespeare as a commonly produced English playwright of the 16th century, and Dr. Faustus is likely his most famous play. Christopher Marlowe's play characteristics were that he tended to focus primarily on a single protagonist whose complex motivations are illuminated through an episodic story. The story is rearranged and telescoped, and he altered historical events in his historical plays in order to create a sense of cause and effect and thus a coherent story. When Marlowe was killed in 1593, he and Shakespeare had written about the same number of plays, and many believe Marlowe's command of blank verse was better than Shakespeare's when they were the same age. Marlowe and the other university wits blended classical and medieval devices with compelling stories drawn from multiple sources. William Shakespeare, many consider Shakespeare to be the greatest playwright of all time. He became a shareholder in the sharing company known as the Chamberlain's Men in 1594. Then he became a partial owner of the Globe Theatre in 1598. He then became a partial owner of the indoor Blackfriars Playhouse in 1608. He was involved in more aspects of theatre than any other playwright of his day. He took up playwriting between 1589 and 1592 with Henry VI Parts 1, 2, and 3. And after establishing his career as a playwright, he wrote roughly one comedy and tragedy per season for his first 10 years. And in his second 10 years, his play output was slightly lower. He wrote well over 30 plays, and he has some collaborations with other writers during his time as well. Shakespeare's play characteristics are built largely on borrowing. He borrowed stories from many sources, from history, mythology, legend, fiction, and other plays. He reworked borrowed material until it was distinctly in his own style, and the situations usually clearly established in the opening scenes, and the action develops logically out of this exposition at the beginning of the play. In Shakespeare's play, a number of plots are usually interwoven. At first, they proceed independently of each other, and eventually the plots come together as the denouement approaches. And the resolution of one large plot often leads to the resolution of the other plots in the play, and this is how a feeling of unity is created among the plots in the play. The action in Shakespeare's plays normally take place over months or years and occur in widely separate places, and this creates a sense of ongoing life behind the scenes. Casts are composed of well-rounded characters who span from the inept and ridiculous to the commanding and heroic, and from the young and innocent to the old and corrupt. His plays depict most characters sympathetically. He makes characters who seem to be living individuals rather than mere stage figures. He has a lot of poetic and figurative dialogue. Shakespeare arouses specific emotions, moods, and ideas with this poetic and figurative dialogue, and his plays create a network of complex associations and connotations that transcend the immediate dramatic situation. Shakespeare attempted all the popular dramatic types and subjects of his era. He gave each their most effective expression. He wrote several types of plays, including histories and chronicles, such as Richard III, comedies, such as A Midsummer Night's Dream, and tragedies, such as Hamlet. So in early modern England, plays were controlled and censored by the government. In 1581, the Master of Revels was a government figure who had the power to license the performance of all plays. In 1594, the Chamberlain's Men, Shakespeare's theater company, was officially licensed for performance by the government. In 1603, when King James I succeeded Queen Elizabeth as monarch, the name of the Chamberlain's Men was changed to the King's Men. There were some recurring structures for acting companies in early modern England. companies were organized on the sharing plan, which meant that financial risks and profits were divided among the actors who had become part owners of the company by buying shares in it. Becoming a shareholder was expensive, and the shareholder had to commit to a minimum of 3 years working with the company. Companies bought back and resold shares of those who left. Some companies had as many as 12 shareholding members. A shareholder committee determined what plays would be produced, and shareholders acted in major roles, participated in business, wrote plays, and supervised costumes and props. Shareholders also divided company profits among themselves after paying all other expenses. Other people in acting companies were hired men. These are non-shareholding actors and workers who played supporting roles, worked as prompters, wardrobe keepers, stage keepers, musicians, janitors, and those with good reputation might get an offer to buy shares. 4 to 6 apprentice boys were in companies to play women. They would begin performing at 10 and they lasted until early 20s. Apprenticeship lasted 10 to 12 years. Rules of conduct existed in these companies with fines for infringement. 1 shilling was charged for being late to a rehearsal, 3 shilling for late to performance, 10 shillings for performing drunk, £1 for missing a performance, and £40 for wearing a costume outside the theater or taking a prop. All acting companies toured, since London did not provide enough theaters for all the companies there. The famous form of theater that people think of when they think of performance in Renaissance England is the outdoor public theater. It's an open-air theater with awnings along the top edges. Several were built near the London border between 1567 and 1623. It was a multi-sided polygon, and in the case of the Rose, it had 14 sides and a diameter of about 72 feet. There was a courtyard of about 49 feet across at the Rose that allowed for standing audience, and the yard sloped downward towards the stage with a surface of cinders and nutshells. The Rose stage jutted into the yard about 16.5 feet. And while they weren't all the same size, these proportions were pretty standard amongst theaters of the time. The stage was elevated about 5 feet, and it was tapered. The stage was about 37 feet wide, where it intersected with the galleries, and it tapered to about 27 feet at the front. There were 3 levels of galleries for audience seating, and the stage was, as I said, approximately 5 feet high, and there was a tiring house with 3 levels and a door at the back of the stage.